Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. And if you noticed a bit of unseemly haste in today's pod, that's because Kieran has tickets for the Euro final at Wembley. And also, Kieran, I suppose, because we're recording before it, we should cover both tabloid bases just in case. So well done, the Lionesses. What a brilliant performance. It's been fantastic. Or, why? They let us down. Just like the men. What's going on? Lionesses slaughtered by the Fraulines. Why are they not called the Frau Lionesses? Surely the Frau Lionesses would be...
That is excellent, yes.
That'd be a great name for the women's German. Yes, it's been whatever happens today, Kieran. I think we can agree it's been a rather special tournament, actually. It's been very good, and hopefully it will be a brilliant staging post for women's football, and we can get attendances up at the WSL and Championship games. Yes,
it's an opportunity. It's still a challenge as far as the women's game is concerned to build up interest in terms of people physically attending the game. But if the FA take advantage of this, and they do have plans, I can assure you of that. And we can make the WSL competitive as well, because I think the big fear is that it becomes dominated by 3 or 4 clubs.
Yes.
And building up a fan base for anything other than those 3 or 4 big clubs, it would therefore become very difficult.
Is the Baroness going with you today?
She is. So, yeah, we both get our England shirts and really looking forward to it because, as you said, it's been a fantastic tournament. Quality of the football has been excellent. Some of the goals have been off the scale. Look, if you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. I don't watch lacrosse. I don't necessarily watch Formula One, but I don't slag off people that do. That's what I don't understand about the reaction of some blokes who just seem very angry about it. When I last checked, there were 429 alternative stations you could be watching this afternoon when the match is on. Just choose one of them. It's not forced down your throat.
Or you could go for a walk, read a book, all sorts of things. Yes. Surprisingly violent game, lacrosse, as it happens.
Oh, yeah. Lethal.
Yeah, very good. I'm glad the Baroness is going. So everybody listening to this on Monday, if you noticed a one-woman pitch invasion at the end of the game, that's you know who it was. It's questions day. We've got some really good questions. And the first one comes from George Rylat. Talking of Wembley, is it more financially beneficial to finish in an automatic promotion spot or to finish in the playoffs and then win them due to the benefits of playing more games, playing at Wembley, TV money, etc.?
Very, very marginally it is, because there will be money given by Sky to, first of all, the playoff semi-finalists, which by definition will include the finalists. So you get a little bit of money from that. You might sell some more merchandise, especially if you reach the final. So there's the profits from that. There's the interest in the town. You might get a couple of short-term sponsorship deals on the back of it for the final. The way that it's normally done in terms of the Wembley money, and this is sort of a gentleman's agreement, so it's not been done by every single club, but the winner normally sets aside their share of the receipts from the final at Wembley and gives them to the loser on the grounds that they're just about to receive £100 million cheque from the Premier League. And therefore, and I think that was set up a few years ago. It's not enshrined, but most clubs do it. It's the equivalent of I've lost in cup finals, and when the opposing player when you're sitting on the pitch crying comes and ruffles your hair, it's a bit like that. So it's not a huge consolation, but I think it's one of the good things about football when it does happen.
Do you know, I think that's one of the single most annoying things about football, and I'm glad I was never good enough to be a professional footballer, because I've had so many. If I ever got to a cup final and I was sitting on the pitch, lost in my own thoughts, and the other team's centre half came and ruffled my hair, I would spark him out. I don't understand why they just sit there and go and just give a little weary nod rather than going, don't patronise me. Yeah. I suppose the downside, though, to winning the playoffs, Kieran, is you then have about 4 weeks less than the other clubs to sort out new transfers.
Exactly. So, any short-term financial benefit is by far offset by the fact that you go into that Wembley final and the finance director and the manager are fully aware that they've got two budgets for the following season. And as soon as you are promoted, and remember, some clubs are promoted before the end of the season. We're aware of that. When some clubs walk away with it, they are already in negotiation with players, and although the transfers can't be officially registered before a particular date, deals are done literally from the moment that the club is promoted. The feelers that have been put out become concreted, and progress is made. So it does reduce the pool of talent. If you are trying to get loans from other clubs, especially clubs in the Premier League, perhaps, or from overseas, that can be sorted that much quicker as well. So it's not something that I would encourage, and also. The playoffs, there is no enjoyment at all in a playoff match unless you're 4-0 up in injury time. That's when you can start to relax. The rest of the time, as anybody who's ever watched it, it's just tension. There's no pleasure.
Well, everyone says, it's the best way to go up. It's only the best way to go up if you know 100% that you're going to go up through the playoffs. If you're guaranteed a spot in a promotion, then fine, it is great. But until that final whistle goes, it's horrible. I don't even like watching them. Too much at stake. Evan Smith has our next question. And Evan says, if a club agrees add-ons, such as winning the FA Cup, sell-on clauses, number of goals, etc., when does this agreement end? Is it the end of a player's contract? Is it after X number of years, or until a new contract is signed? If a selling club had hugely lucrative clauses inserted, could the buying club renegotiate the player's contract and avoid those clauses if they were contract life or original contract based?
Right. I mean, this is a good point that Evan raises, but there is always protection from the selling club's point of view to prevent the buying club after 6 months saying, "Oh, you've done remarkably well. We're going to give you an extra, $5,000 a week," and that nulls the original contract. So the contract is between the two football clubs rather than the buying club and the football player, and therefore it will be linked to that player's achievements in terms of participation, being part of a successful club that wins trophies, international caps, etc., rather than any private negotiations between the player and the club. Now, if the player signs a 4-year contract and that gets extended to 5 or 6 after a couple of years, again, I think the selling club. My granddaughter just appeared at the window.
Oh, so that's a happy bark, is it?
Is it happy? Oh, yeah, he's very excited now. Right. You start to hear some squeaking now.
Oh, is that happy?
Is that happy? Yes. So the whole purpose here is to protect the is to protect the selling club. That be built in. They will have taken legal advice to make sure that they don't lose out. Sometimes these deals can not be particularly beneficial. I seem to remember when Brighton sold Bobby Zamora to Spurs. There was a sell-on clause, and then they swapped him for Jermaine Defoe with West Ham, and that was agreed between the two clubs at a fee that Brighton didn't get any of the sell-on. So it can be manipulated, but in the main, it's protection for the selling club.
Are you sure Finley's happy? He sounds to me like he doesn't like kids.
No, he's got a training shoe in his mouth and he's squeaking because he gets so excited that he knows that he can't. He gets so excited that he doesn't want to nip people, but he just wants to say hello to them with his mouth. So therefore, he has learnt to put one of my shoes in his mouth, so therefore he can't bite somebody.
He just wants to say hello with his mouth. That's probably a euphemism somewhere. Chris Swain, this is an interesting one. Chris Swain points out not just football is played at Old Trafford, St James's Park, Bramall Lane, the DW Stadium, and many more. For example, rugby league, which is played at quite a few stadiums. Is this a good earner for the clubs? And is income from those other sports able to go on their books for FFP?
Well, if we answer the second question first, yes, this would be deemed to be commercial income from the utilisation of the pitch. So therefore, it would be allowed for profitability and sustainability purposes. With regards to how much do they get, it varies. I don't know whether people have been aware, but there's a bit of a dispute taking place at present between Rochdale Football Club and Rochdale Hornets, with who play at what I call Spotland, but it was the Crown Arena. I think they might have changed the name again, the rugby club pay. I think it's a 5-figure fee. I think it's about 16 grand. I seem to remember seeing for the use of the stadium during the year. So it's not necessarily the rent. I mean, the rent is one issue. If you've got a concert taking place there during the summer. With the Stones playing at Anfield, I went to see the Killers at the Etihad. They will get a pretty sizable 6-figure fee. Potentially could be up as far as $1 million from the promoter. But the big issue is what's going to happen to the hospitality and kiosk spend. So, it would normally, the football club would probably try to arrange that they take, say, 90% of the hospitality spend for that match. And that's how the club will make additional money. And for a club such as Spurs, who, Spurs are, we've said this, are very, very smart. They've got much bigger concourses than at the old stadium. They're making somewhere between 800 grand to £1 million per match from a Premier League match, in respect of the hospitality spend and the catering. When the NFL come to town, by all accounts, and I've not managed to see an NFL match at the Spurs stadium because the tickets sort of sell out
straight away.
But I believe the price of a pint is jacked up because NFL fans are used to paying premium prices for that particular sport. So that's the big issue. It's not just the rental fee; it's the ancillary income that you can generate, and that can be very lucrative.
The problem with having other sports and concerts on your pitch is that we all know the grumpiest employee at every football club is the groundsman. I don't know what it is in their psyche. They are the bass players, basically, of football. They're just you very rarely meet a happy-go-lucky bass player. And it's the same. It's the same with groundsmen. They are just. I just wouldn't want to be the person who says to them, that pitch you love so much, the one you can't sleep at night because you worry about it. We've got rugby league on Sunday, and we've got the Rolling Stones on Monday. Just.
Really but we bought you a new fork to take the divots out. It's not all bad news.
Neil Greenwood. Again, it's an interesting one. I think the authorities have caught up with Neil Greenwood's question, actually, which indicates that this may be one from the bottom of our 2-year waiting list pile. Neil says there are many different patterns shown on the pitch in the way the grass is cut. Are there any rules against the sponsor's logo being shaded onto the pitch in such a way?
Right. Well, I refer you, Neil, to Rule K20 of the Premier League 2022-23 handbook, which specifically says that the pitch can only be cut in vertical lines from one goal mouth to the other. So some of there used to be some fantastic pitch creations, and all of that has now been prohibited. So therefore, that would also include the prohibition of logos. Now, we've seen this in other sports. Could there be an agreement between the Premier League and some of the broadcasters that they can put an overlay, a logo on the pitch? And everything's up for negotiation, as far as I can make out. Now, whether that would need the approval of FIFA or UEFA as well, or whether they've even thought of it, we don't know. But we've certainly seen it at cricket and other sports as well. But look, I went into the pitch dimensions section. I looked at the pitch section of the Premier League handbook because I am a 60-year-old chartered accountant, so therefore, by definition, I have no friends. So how better a way to spend a Sunday morning? And there is now a fixed dimension for a Premier League pitch. All pitches are supposed to be 105 times 68 metres in size. So I don't know how this was agreed, but there are 6 clubs who are non-compliant: Chelsea, Palace, Liverpool, Fulham, Everton and Forest, because historically their stadiums were built in such a way that their pitches are slightly smaller. But it does appear that the Premier League is trying to get a standardisation as much as it can. So I don't know why this particular rule was introduced, because you remember years ago there used to be stories of Tony Pulis has reckoned that with Manchester United coming to town and their winger's going to tear his team apart, he's asked the groundsman to reduce the width of the Stoke pitch by 4 yards on either side. It's to stop that type of behaviour. And once a club commits to pitch dimensions for the season, it's got to be for all of the matches.
Malcolm Allison, when he was manager of Palace, had the pitch widened so it made life easier for Peter Taylor, the winger. But of course, Malcolm didn't think that through, because it just made life easier for every other club's wingers as well, which is why we got relegated 2 seasons running. The new regulations, Kieran, are they presumably to do with VAR, perhaps, make life easier for them, so you've got fixed lines for them to look at when they're making decisions, or do they impose their own lines, I suppose, don't they?
I'm not sure. It could be linked. I'm not. There's nothing in the handbook that refers the pitch to VAR. They would normally be set up at the start of the season by the clubs and the bigwigs who do the wonky lines.
Yeah, do you know what really annoys me about? So I've been reading those handbooks for a separate project for the FA's ground guidelines and the Premier League's ground guidelines, and they refer to 4 sides of the pitch, which really annoys me, because I know I'm wrong, because it's 2 sides and 2 ends, surely.
Yes, exactly.
Really, you'd think, wouldn't you? Maybe I'll have a word with it next time. You're at Wembley today, Kieran. See if you can buttonhole an official and have a word with him.
Never mind this football. We've got a pitch inquiry.
Exactly. Mark Yellen, interesting name, and an interesting question as well, actually. And this seems to me to make perfect common sense. Would it be possible, says Mark, for a player to stipulate that they would like their contract to end in January rather than at the end of the season? I would imagine, given the shortage of available players for sale in the January window, with most selling clubs unwilling to let top players leave, this would be a chance for a player to increase their demand tenfold and seal a big move ahead of the rest of the market.
Would it be possible? Yes, because we do see players come in on short-term contracts, especially in the lower leagues. So I think from a legal perspective, that would be feasible. I think if I was that player's representative, I wouldn't be necessarily that keen for a January transfer, because if we are talking about a player moving from one big club to another, remember that player is going to be cup tied from a Champions League perspective. If you're going from, say, if Chelsea have a player who has a contract which ends on the 31st of January, if he's played for Chelsea in the Champions League, he can't go to Juventus, he can't go to Real Madrid, he can't go to Liverpool, etc. So that would reduce the demand from other clubs for the players' services. And football is a very strange vehicle. Players stock, as we know, goes up and down in a very volatile way. What happens if the player's just had 2 or 3 stinking months? All of a sudden he's out of favour, and the downside is the buying clubs might not be looking to sign a player until June or July, because the players that they've got at the club, their contracts don't expire to July, so therefore they can't shift them off the wage bill. So I think it's technically feasible, but I don't think it would work in practice. And we've got the National League, which allows clubs to sign players on 10-month contracts. I think when we had Lee, one of the goalkeepers from the National League, he was telling us that contracts end in April, and effectively May and June they don't have employment because the season's ended. If I was a player, I'd want my contract to end when the others players did, because just security of tenure.
Our next question, Kieran, comes from Jack Preston, which is a great name, but just imagine Sky Sports commentators would explode, wouldn't they? Imagine Jack Preston was a player in the Championship and he played for Blackburn. They would just, oh my God, they wouldn't be able to cope with Preston playing for Blackburn. This is a question that won't go away. It happened a long time ago, but fans of all clubs are still asking this question. And Derby County fans, spoiler alert, you're in this question, but it's not bad news, don't worry. But Jack's question is, could Derby County still make a legal claim against QPR for losses incurred when losing to them in the 2014 playoff final? At a time, as we know, that QPR were not just flouting financial fair play rules, but hitting them with a sledgehammer, essentially. As a follow-up, as the idea is preposterous, says Jack, do you agree that clubs should not be suing other clubs? And if anyone is to be sued, surely it must be the governing body. I mean, it's also a topical question, Kieran, because we saw that Burnley were threatening to sue Everton and then decided not to. So it is quite an up-to-date question, but I suspect you do think clubs shouldn't be suing each other, don't you? But could Derby County still have a claim against QPR after all these years?
This is something which I've always wondered about, and I've even spoken to some Derby fans, and they said, "Well, yeah, on the day we lost the match," and they've seemed remarkably philosophical about it. I'd have been spitting tacks.
Well, to be fair, they've had other things on their mind recently, Kieran.
True.
It might once they're third in the Championship at Christmas, they might look for something else to be angry about and come back to this one. But
I would say they probably had a case at the time. I think, whilst there's no formal statute of limitations, as far as I'm aware, in respect of when a claim can be made, the fact that they've been through 2 or 3 sets of owners since then and been in administration, somebody must have looked at this and made a decision. Have they taken legal advice with regards to it? I highly suspect that they have. And it could be that the legal advice was, this could be expensive, slow, and we don't think you've got a very good chance. Again, if we look for precedent, I always go back to the Carlos Tevez Sheffield United versus West Ham claim. And Sheffield United did make a successful claim in the region of around about £20 million with respect to Carlos Tevez's registration. But I think they would probably struggle now. I don't think there's a desire for it. I'm appearing on a law show on Tuesday, so I will ask some of the legal people who are there for their opinion. Yes. Although it's too late for Monday's podcast. With regards to the follow-up questions from Jack. Do I agree that clubs should not be suing other clubs? Well, this is, in an ideal world, we would be playing in a Corinthian spirit in the game of football, and there would be no need for any of this. Now, I've heard anecdotally, and I have to say here, I've got no idea whether this is true or not. So it could be somebody that was stirring that, as a result of all of the disputes that have been going on, the EFL, who have sort of been on the hook for some of this because their legal bill has gone up from around about £300,000 a year to $4 million. Now, that could be complete codswallop. But it does show that we are living in an increasingly litigious sporting environment because the rewards for success are so great and the penalties for relegation and not achieving success are so high. Jack says, if anybody is going to be sued, surely it must be the governing body. There, I would disagree, because in the case of Queen's Park Rangers, they were in breach of the rules. They did not publish their accounts until they had been promoted to the Premier League. So the EFL didn't know what was happening. Now, could we have a system of real-time monitoring? Where the regulatory authorities are able to see overspending by clubs as it is happening, and be able to act in a quicker manner. I think that is a step forward, and I think some of the organisations have made that step. But I don't think it's a bit like should my employer be sued because of something that I do as an employee, and that's not the case. You have a degree of professional responsibility, but if somebody goes postal, an individual member, there's very little you can do about it.
So I was thinking of suing you, Kieran, because your dog's barking is not conducive to my hearing.
Right.
Just for the publicity, because as we've seen in the last couple of days, I mean, Jamie Vardy's missus has never had such publicity. I mean, we'd be getting 10,000 extra listeners a week here. I mean, it might cost me a fortune in legal fees, but I think it's probably worth it to get on the front page of the Sun, isn't it?
Man bites dog, yes.
The Carlos Tevez thing, I've said that groundsmen were the grumpiest people in football. I interviewed Neil Warnock while the Carlos Tevez thing was going on. just for that period of time, I think you can take it as a given that Neil Warnock was the grumpiest person in football. The rules were changed, Kieran, weren't they? When because QPR got promoted to the Premier League,
yeah,
and then, as you say, the EFL found out that they'd been playing fast and loose with the FFP rules. But the Premier League refused to do anything about it. The Premier League wouldn't impose any sanctions. So did the EFL wait for QPR to come down and impose any punishment on them? I can't remember.
Well, it took 4 years for the judgment to come through. There was a claim by the EFL. So QPR were back in the English Football League by the time the judgment came through. And I think this was the first time I've had any dealings with our good friend Nick DeMarco, because somebody leaked the report to me. So me, I'm not mischievous. I'm no more mischievous than I am cynical.
Indeed.
So I decided to stick it up on social media, and and Nick sort of politely cleared the message. Any chance you could just remove that? Yeah. It's not public yet. I was like, yeah, fine. It was a very interesting case in the sense that the Premier League have now agreed that they will impose fines which have been determined by the EFL charge committee, but they will not impose any points deductions because they say it will reduce the competitive balance of our competition. Remember, we've seen in the last 2 seasons, clubs have been relegated from the EFL Championship on the basis of points deductions. We've had Sheffield Wednesday followed by Derby County. And the Premier League says, we have sympathy for you if you want to go and find somebody. So Leicester have paid a fine, Bournemouth have paid a fine, I think Fulham have paid a fine as well, when those have been levied by the EFL. We will impose those fines through we have the ability to do so in terms of distribution of monies, but we won't go as far as points deductions.
Now, Kieran, we haven't had any reason to criticise Producer Guy for quite some time, which is a bit boring because I used to enjoy it. But we have a question here. The question before Jack Preston's question about Derby was all about contracts. Now, if I'd been putting these questions together, I would probably have put another question about contracts off the back of the question about contracts rather than having a little pause in between. But Producer Guy has decided to just randomly throw these questions. He's obviously bored this week and he's just thrown them against a wall and seen which one trickled down to the skirting board first. But this question comes from Andrew Lashon. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong, Andrew, but I hope I haven't. Andrew Lation says it's a very simple question. It's probably the shortest question we've ever had. Can clubs force players to leave before their contracts expire?
In the case of gross misconduct, then yes, they would be able to terminate the contract with immediately. With regards to other conditions, they could come to an agreement with the player and effectively pay up the contract. That would be one thing. So, let's say we've got a player he's fallen out with a manager. We've got to January, February. It's quite clear he's not going to play again. In order just to have the player not coming to training, not having taken up time of the physio, not bitching about the manager and the chairman to the other players all the time. You can't. There have been circumstances where it's called into the office. Look, here's an amount of money on your bike. We've agreed it with your agent. You're not going to lose anything. It's your full payment. That's fine. So that's one way of doing it. And another way of doing it, sort of, is if a player's in the final year of his contract and his face, for whatever reason, doesn't fit, you send him out on loan for the full season and pay all of his wages. Now, this is rumoured, and again, I cannot say this with any degree of certainty. I believe this might have been the case for Danny Drinkwater, who had a move to Chelsea, if we recall, and things didn't work out for him professionally and personally, and this is we are dealing with young men and their lives, but he went on loan to Reading, and certainly from people that I spoke to, they said that Chelsea were paying all of his wages for that final season. They wanted the player to be given an opportunity to ply his trade, but they didn't want him at the club, and it suited all parties for that to be the case.
Well, speaking of Chelsea, guys, accidentally back in the good books, because this next question is about Chelsea, but he wasn't to know that you were going to mention Danny Drinkwater, so no credit to him. Patrick Burke has this question, and again, this is a subject that comes up quite a lot with football fans or non-Chelsea fans, certainly. FIFA are looking to impose restrictions on the number of loan players that clubs can bring in and send out. Now, Chelsea, as we know, have had loads of players on loan for the last few years, and the restrictions would mean they'd be limited to 8, reducing to 6 in several years' time. How significantly would this impact Chelsea's finances, their current business model, and would there be any immediate FFP implications? Also, could a club like Man City use other clubs who are part of the City group to bypass these rules?
Yeah, a good follow up that one from Patrick as well. Let's just again go through this in turn. Patrick's exactly right. I think at one stage Chelsea had something like 41 players out on loan. The FIFA rules, I don't actually will hugely impact clubs, even clubs such as Chelsea, because the FIFA rules only apply to players who are over 21. So if you think about players such as Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount, they've all gone out on loan to get the benefits of the increased competition that you would get from playing in the Championship and playing in an overseas market as well. So it only applies to players who are over 21. The FIFA loan rules are actually quite intriguing. They only apply to international loans as well, so not necessarily domestic. You are restricted to a maximum of 3 players from club to club, which I think is actually quite good because the Premier League's potential desire to have some sort of glorified B teams, which appeared to be part of their new deal, I think that would fall foul of the FIFA loan rules. FIFA also now said that loans can be for a maximum of 1 year. And if we refer back to Chelsea, they signed, was it the Colombian winger Juan Cuadrado, who joined Chelsea on the strength of a good World Cup, didn't work out, and then they sent him to Juventus on a 3-year loan, which just seemed ludicrous. I think there were financial fair play implications there. So I don't think Chelsea would be hugely impacted, and it's got to be said that Chelsea are very, very good at selling players, and I don't think they get a huge amount of credit for this. But in the course of the last decade, they've sold players for over £820 million, which is it's a constant. And you look at some of those players, the likes of Tomori and Abrahams who have gone, Tammy Abraham who have gone, as well as some of the star players who have. Costa and so on that have moved on, and their ability to shift players to China when the Chinese market was really hot was really clever of them. So that they've always been a very good club from a financial perspective in terms of moving players on and generating money from that. Whilst these loan rules on the face of it look restrictive, I don't think that Chelsea or any of the other, even the big Premier League clubs, have that many over 21 players. Are they going to put 6 of them out on loan overseas in a year? I don't think so. And if they can't do that, then we go to sort of the Danny Drinkwater situation where you'll just find a domestic club who you can utilise, and but all parties tend to be happy.
Yeah, and what about the follow-up question? The Man City, could they? I presume the idea from Patrick would be that City could, send one of their players to one of their other City Group teams and loan them from there.
Well, yes, and to stop that, I'm not always the biggest fan of FIFA, but they do appear to have their eye on the ball with respect to this. Is that you're not allowed to do sub loans, so you can't loan it to another part of the City Football Group, who then loans it out to somebody else. Right. So that is now prohibited. So that they certainly have tightened up the rules. They're aware of the potential implications of the multi-club ownership model.
Yeah, again, I think we may have to have a new verbal rule or grammar rule for future pods, because as we were talking about this question, it got very cloudy and overcast, and it just started to rain, which of course I love, but I suspect it might be my dear father-in-law, God rest his soul, expressing his displeasure, because one of the things he hated was using the word impact as a verb.
Oh,
so I think we might have to have a golden rule on this one, everybody. No more using impact. So it's next time we say, will this have an impact? Right, I know young people will be ignoring me because I'm used to that as I'm a parent. But if we could, just to avoid the sound of my father-in-law spinning in his grave. Peter Fawkes is our penultimate question. And we haven't answered this question before, which surprises me, Kieran, because, again, it's one of those things that all football fans will ask, especially around January time. All football fans will ask this question. Because, of course, while we're really happy and proud that we have players that are representing their countries, this is the question that Peter Fawkes puts. When players are released from their respective clubs for the African Cup of Nations or for other reasons, do the clubs still need to pay the wages for that period of time? Or are the players essentially on unpaid leave and can't perform their employment duties, i.e. playing the fixtures, so therefore don't get paid?
Right. Clubs are obliged to pay wages during this period. That's a FIFA rule. And the rule is that when a national association asks a player to represent the country, then the club must release the player, but the player is still employed by the club, and therefore the club has a legal obligation to pay those wages. I suspect, and I don't want to disrespect any player who wants to take this up with me at all. If I was a successful Premier League player on £100,000 a week or more, and AFCON comes along, and it's going to be a month-long tournament. If I was, if it cost me £500,000 as a player to represent my nation for a month, and I wasn't going to get paid, I think we would see a lot of players suddenly taking early retirement. And that's not to criticise the players. They do have families, they do have financial responsibilities on a much broader sphere. But I think we would have seen, especially in the Premier League, where we do have a lot of players who represent their nations in AFCON, we would have seen a lot of players finding excuses to not take part in the tournament, because the individual football associations in Africa themselves don't tend to be wealthy. So therefore, what they pay the players is pretty low level during the course of that tournament, and it would no way reflect or be comparable to the earnings of the player from the Premier League or the other big leagues in Europe.
I do sometimes wonder, Kieran, whether high-profile African players could miss out on lucrative transfers because a club says, look, we've already got 3 or 4 players that we're going to be missing in January. As good as this player is, perhaps we should look elsewhere. Do you think that's possible?
It absolutely happens. I can assure you.
Okay, that's interesting.
You talk to people at clubs, and they're looking at their 25-man squad for the course of the season, and if they're going to be in a relegation battle, if they're potentially going for the Premier League, you don't want to lose 4 players, and you can understand the frustration from the club's point of view. But if I got an opportunity to represent my country of birth or my country of heritage, I'd take it like a shot, and I'd be just so proud in doing so. So I think that the clubs have to be aware of this when they're doing their broader planning.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? I think there's been a shift in supporters' attitudes in the past couple of years, actually. I mean, whereas it just used to be a nuisance, now I think most fans are actually genuinely pleased. I mean, Czech Kieran won AFCON this year, and fans were delighted. But 5 or 6 seasons ago, it was kind of like, oh my God, this is the Premier League, so they can't leave just to play that. But I think that attitude, thankfully, has changed, and clubs are genuinely proud that they have players representing their countries. But again, not to the extent that you kind of hope they don't get through the group stages because you want them back for an important game. Our last question comes from Gareth Williams. And I think this is a very interesting one, Kieran, and it's not one that I've ever really considered before. Gareth says, why do individual clubs set their own ticket pricing? Many leagues and different sports across the world have centralised set pricing.
Yes, I think the reason for this, Gareth, is that the Premier League is not a franchise competition. So with the franchise competition, you have centralisation of revenues, you have centralisation of costs to a certain extent, and therefore everybody agrees to charge the same price. It's a bit like McDonald's. There's been a big kerfuffle this week, hasn't there, that the price of a McDonald's cheeseburger has increased for the first time in 14 years from
I have to say,
99 pence to £1.19.
Really, it's passed me by, that, Kieran. I have to say, there's been a lot going on this week. I'm afraid was that front page of the Daily Mail? I didn't know.
Not sure.
I imagine it'd be Rishi Sunak's fault if it wasn't the Daily Mail.
Absolutely, everything else is at present. But that's a countrywide agreement that McDonald's have with its franchisees, that you're going to charge 99 pence for this, you're going to charge £1.19 for that. Whereas, as far as the Premier League, the EFL, the National League are concerned, they are not franchises; they are member-owned organisations. So, therefore, in terms of pricing strategy, it depends upon demographics, it depends upon the size of the fan base, it depends upon the level of demand, I'll quite happily criticise clubs when I think they warrant it. But if you take a look, even at the big clubs like Liverpool and Manchester United and Chelsea and so on, Liverpool and Manchester United have frozen season ticket prices year in, year out when they could have put those prices up, which I think is a good sign in terms of their pricing strategy. What we are seeing is that I think individual match day prices, those have tended to tick up quite a bit, and that sort of reveals the overall strategy of the club. So, I was looking this morning I was comparing Liverpool to West Ham. Now, West Ham have got a bigger capacity stadium than Liverpool. West Ham generate £27 million a year from ticket sales, or they did in the last season before COVID. That compares to 84 at Liverpool. And you go, well, okay, Liverpool had a few more home games, but they didn't have 3 times as many fixtures as West Ham. And the reason why Liverpool generates so much more money, to quote John Lydon, tourists are money. And Liverpool only have 27,000 season tickets. So that means that they've got half of their ground every match is being sold to individual ticket holders for whom you can charge a lot more money. Whereas West Ham, when they moved to the London Stadium, they initially had 54,000 season tickets, so they had twice as many season ticket holders as Liverpool, and they were originally selling only 3,000 match day tickets, where you can get that price up. It looks as if, though, West Ham have reduced the number of season ticket holders to only 45,000. I think they've done that through sort of, as people don't renew or people pass on or people move on. They've not released those tickets to new people, and that they've realised actually that there is more money to be made from individual ticket holders because it's the attraction, it's a London ground and so on. That doesn't apply to every club, and that's why they have to go and be more cautious in their pricing strategies.
I don't know about the price of cheeseburgers, Kieran. Have you seen the price of Lurpak lately? It's just ridiculous. I generally just considered Googling how much it would cost to buy a cow and churn my own, because it's just ridiculous.
I'm just glad that Marlon Brando's no longer with us, because we will remember. Google it, kids.
Even by our standards, that's a niche reference. That's a film called Last Tango in Paris, which involved an intimate scene of a graphic nature and several. It would have cost him a fortune. You're right, Kieran. They wouldn't have been able to make that film nowadays if they were relying on Lurpak. And I don't think margarine would have the same erotic quality, would it? Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to join them and make a small monthly contribution to the pod, go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And remember, if you do, and you give us £3 to £5 a month, you can avoid the adverts if you so wish. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Good luck to the Lionesses against the Frau Lionesses today. Kieran's straining at the leash to get off and get the coach, but it's not the 50s, is it? But we do just have time in the meanwhile to hand over to Kieran for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, thank you so much for the support for the show in the various means that you give to it. I know there was a really positive response to the interview we did with Jason Stockford, which I've got to say was we said afterwards it was such a great to engage with Jason, somebody that has a series of values that we could pin to the wall.
Absolutely.
So you can use Patreon as a vehicle for as little as £1 a month. But another way to show you support for the show is to go on to your podcast app and to leave us a review. And if you give us 5 stars, by all accounts, it helps us in the charts. It boosts us in the algorithms, and that just helps in terms of our credibility when producer guy sends emails to say, "I'm producer guy. You may have heard of me. Would you like to come on the show?" It doesn't matter what you say. As far as the review is concerned, you could say that you'd rather have it presented by Steve Lamacq and Sammy Davis Jr. And I quite like the idea of that, because I think that Steve's a pretty cool dude. Steve's a very small dude, and I think he could probably persuade Sammy Davis Jr. to perhaps do a cover version of Dickie Davis Eyes by Half Man Half Biscuit, or even to sort of get a jamming session with Ball Boy or Bogshed. And I'd be fully there as indie dad. I'd be loving every second of that.
Yeah, do you think Steve Lamacq talks like that all the time? That's my big question. I would. Do you know what? There's even if you're 10 years of age listening to this, if Google is the most amazing thing, and Bruce Forsyth, who I had the pleasure to work with towards the end of his life, was still speaking about it. It's a wonderful clip of Bruce Forsyth and Sammy Davis Jr. dancing on a TV show from about 1963, when it's just fantastic. Sammy, I mean, he's the coolest bloke ever, isn't he, Sammy Davis Jr.? Just amazing. That would be actually. I think that's my favourite combo for a while. That one, Kieran. Yeah, I would definitely listen to that one. That'd be great. I imagine it would take some time, and every now and again, Sammy Davis Jr. would go, "Man, why are you talking like that? You weren't talking like that off stage before we started. You had this really posh voice." But anyway, bye everybody. Good luck to Lionesses.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.